And the coolest thing, I haven't seen a game do this yet. Gearworks is a card-driven area control game. I know that sounds kind of bizarre, but it works really well. And the publisher described this game as steampunk Sudoku. Don't leave just yet, because to me that didn't sound very appetizing. Because this is an interesting game, and one that I think is worth your time. Friendly reminder, if you enjoy or just tolerate my content, Marcy May would like you to click that subscribe button. You smell like deviled eggs. And despite the larger box, beautiful playmat, and all these nice little tokens, it is a fairly quick, straightforward, streamlined experience. The goal of the game is to collect the most victory points by the end of the game. Most of your victory points will be claiming these different parts and using them to complete these different contracts or contraptions here. And the more of the needed parts you get on each contraption card, the more points they're worth at the end of the game. Setup is quite simple. You just need to make a 4x5 grid. Now, if you have the playmat for this game, which I think is really nice to have, not essential, but very nice to have, you just roll out the playmat. You'll be placing out these little gears along the sides and then the corresponding parts around them as well. Players will receive one Tinkerer card, one spark, and these sparks are like a currency that gets used throughout the game, and we'll go over what you can use those for in just a moment. And each player will receive 5 gear cards and exactly 1 contraption card. On their turn, players will play 1 card to the grid. Now, there's a couple rules that they have to follow when placing these cards. They will take one of their cards from their hand, and there can only be 1 of each color in each column, and in the rows, the cards have to be in ascending or descending value. So if you're one of the first ones to play a card in a row, you're kind of setting the pace for what cards can or cannot be played. So for example, here I may want to play this 3 card right here beside this 6. So now the only cards that could be played here would be another 3, 2, or a 1. Drastically cutting down the different cards that could be played in these slots, because maybe I have a bunch of low cards in my hand, such as 2s or 3s. Now after placing that card, I look at the gears in the row and column, and I turn them so that they're matching my color. I happen to be Bartleby? I happen to be Mr. Mustache. So I turn these to my red color, showing that I currently control column C and row 1. Now this matters because at the end of a round, whoever controls those rows and columns will then receive those corresponding parts. And those are the parts that you add to your contraptions at the end of the round. So in this case, I want to get B, which is apparently a disembodied hand, and 4, which happens to be a pencil sharpener, I believe. Now, if I were to get both of those, then at the end of the game, I will score 9 points. At the end of the game, you score 9 points for each completed card. Now, if I only had the pencil sharpener, they're only worth 4 points. Now, any of the parts that you don't get to use at the end of the game, those are worth 2 points as well. Now, at the end of the round, players then assign them to contraption cards from their hand. That's the only time that they can do that. They don't get to assign parts to other contraption cards later or fill in missing parts in contraption cards. It's at the end of each of the 3 rounds that players have the opportunity to do so. So depending on what contraption cards in your hand, that will kind of dictate what rows and columns you may or may not try to conquer by the end of the round. Now, instead of playing a card, players do have the option to skip. The problem with skipping, though, is if everyone else skips, that ends the round. You don't automatically get to come back in, though. You do have to pay one of your sparks to come back in. And that brings me to, I know what you're thinking, Beard, what do the sparks do? You can spend a spark to draw a new gear card. You can spend 2 sparks to replace an existing card out on the board, following the normal placement restriction. You can spend 2 sparks to draw a new contraption card, which is very awesome because that is the way that you get most of your points. But Beard, you said some of those things take 2 sparks. So how do you get more sparks? Well, calm down. I'll tell you. So when placing these cards out here on the grid, let's say that I put this 9 here, and then I would adjust the row and column gears, showing that I, Mr. Mustache, the red player, control those rows and columns now. Now look at the cards closest to the card that you just played. Now if you're able to add or subtract any of those 2 numbers and come up with a sum that is equal to the card that you just placed, you gain 1 spark. So in this instance, 3 and 6 equals 9, I get a spark. So it's quite simple. Place cards on the grid and control the different areas, get the parts that are in them, and hopefully they're the right parts that you need to complete your contraptions. Complete the most contraptions, gain the most points, become the winner of Gearworks. Quite a lovely little package. I don't know really what the purpose of that sleeve is, but anyways, this is a very solid, I will say maybe like one step beyond filler game. Despite its larger box, it is a fairly quick, yet elegant and satisfying game. Taking about half an hour or so, depending on how the teach goes, which the teach is quite simple. Gameplay is fast. There is enough strategy there, though, to make it interesting. And with the different players having the asymmetric powers, that adds a little bit of replay value. I failed to mention, though, that if you don't use your ability, you can only use it once per round, you do gain a spark at the end of the round, so that's cool. The strategy is very interesting in the game, because sometimes you can look at your cards and intentionally, you kind of don't want to play or show your hand too early, because you don't want to maybe take all the corresponding locations, rows, or columns that you might need at first, because other players are just going to go right behind you and trample and take those back. But you may also want to look at your hand and play cards that will maybe narrow down the possibilities or the possible cards that could be played in some of those spots. So those are really kind of neat strategies to play. The game plays great with 2 to 4 players. I think I prefer it best with 3. It does have a solo mode. All the components in it are really nice. The card quality is fantastic. The little wooden gears are screen printed on both sides and they look amazing, and they're nice and chunky. They got some weight to them. The punch pieces for the parts, they're great. The art on the cards is totally rad. I dig the look, the overall look of this game. The steampunk theme. Oh, well, speaking of theme, I feel like there's really not much of a theme here, I guess. It's basically area control with cards, which is interesting, and I like that. It's satisfying and quick. I totally dig it. Game comes with plenty of player aids, enough for each player to have one, and they're quite handy. The insert is nice. There's a place for everything to go into its own place. The review copy that I used in this video is the deluxe version, and the publisher did reach out and say that they do have limited quantities of the deluxe version left, and if you buy that, you do get the playmat, which the playmat isn't 100% necessary. However, I mean, it looks good, and it makes the gameplay a little smoother, and it even has some little helping aids too, like little friendly reminders of, that this way is the ascending or descending order, and then up and down is the different colors. It also has little marks for helping set up the game as well. And the coolest thing, I haven't seen a game do this yet, the mat comes in a box. How dope is that? I think the closest thing I can think of is 25th century Tutankhamun comes in a very nice tube. However, this box doesn't roll. I don't know. I don't know if anyone else has done this, but I really wish all publishers would put mats in boxes, so that way they take up less space hanging in our closet. I know, that was just kind of an odd flex for me to show off my brilliant idea of hanging mats in the closet. Leave a comment down below. How do you store your mats? Have you tried hanging them with pant hangers in the closet? And that's Gearworks, a quick, slick, satisfying, card-driven area control game with wonderful components. And I'm going to give this one 3 out of 5 beard strokes, staying in the Beards collection. Definitely check it out. And thank you for your time and for watching another episode of Rolling with the Beard.